This video is going to walk you through creating or signing into a GitHub account, creating a repository for a file system, connecting to Visual Studio Code. Yes, that means you have to have Visual Studio Code installed on your computer. We're going to install some extensions for Visual Studio Code, and we are going to connect to our repository in GitHub using a remote explorer. Finally, we're going to edit the README file that we use to initialize our repository in GitHub, and then we're going to learn how to commit and push changes. Let's get going. To get started, go to github.com, and then I want you to sign up. Go ahead and use either your personal email or your student email. It's okay. Either one, you can connect them later. The GitHub dashboard will load. There is a ton of stuff that you can learn here. We're not going to get into it. Please watch videos, do research as you see fit. But for this class, we're keeping it super simple. We're just going to use the repositories. So I want you to create a new one right now. Even if you're already a GitHub user, please do create a new one using this method where we're going to name it a special way so that it actually automatically is a website for us. We'll talk more about that later. Go ahead and press new for now. In order for this to be easily used as a website later, we start with our username, again, .github.io. We want to make sure that this is set to public. This is going to be a way that I can check your work, and you can look at your website once you start creating websites. You must initialize this repository with the README file, and it's where you put a description, but it also saves space on the GitHub server saying, hey, I want to have space here. You have to have something there. Go ahead and create repository when you're done. Your repository should open, and you should have this README file there. If you don't, then you should see a message like this, and you can see that it says, we recommend every repository include a README, license, and Git, blah, blah, blah. Click on that README, and it's going to automatically fix it for you. In any instance that you have a problem with your repository, you can go to settings. If you scroll all the way down at the bottom of the page, you're going to find danger zone. Now, the danger zone means just that. Anything that you do here will severely affect your repository in some way, which includes changing the visibility. So my repository is set to public, but if yours was set to private, you can change the visibility here. If you feel like you've made a big enough mistake, or maybe you didn't name your repository correct, this is where you can delete your repository. There are ways also to rename it back up at the top, or if you have a separate email address that you want to transfer ownership completely of this repository to someone else, you can transfer it here. Remember that a website is simply a collection of files that, when brought together in a web browser, work together to display a website or a web page. The majority of files and folders that we're going to be creating in this class, we're going to use Visual Studio Code to do that. And what's cool is we're actually going to be able to see it here as well. And when we're ready, we'll be able to publish our website. Let's go ahead and open Visual Studio Code. Here we go. So now we're in Visual Studio Code, and when you first install it, there might be a lot of extra stuff. You just shut down all the windows, all the clutter, and get to this part. If you want to really get into this, you can go through the Getting Started with VS Code. You can learn the fundamentals. There's lots of walkthroughs and wonderful things to help you. But what we're going to do is sign into Visual Studio Code using our GitHub account, so that then we're going to install an extension to make it so that we can access our repository right here in Visual Studio Code. We're going to start with a little person icon down here and go to Backup and Sync settings. And it says, please sign in to Backup and Sync. You're going to see that it pops up in the middle, and then you're going to click Sign In. And then we're going to sign in with GitHub. Whatever your default Now, whatever your default browser is will open. You may not be signed into GitHub on that browser, so you may have to sign in. Otherwise, just authorize Visual Studio Code here. Asks us, okay, do you really want to open Visual Studio Code? Yes. And you can check this box, always allow vscode.dev to open links of this type in the associated app. That's great. Go ahead, check that. Open Visual Studio Code. You might have to check that more than once. You'll notice that it says settings synced. All right, that was quick. And now you can't really see, like nothing's really changed. But if you click on this again, this accounts, you actually see that you're now with your GitHub, which is great. Now, the next thing that we want to do is make it so that we can use our GitHub repository. Now, we're actually going to install quite a few extensions right now, okay? I'm going to start with GitHub repositories. Here it is, and I'm going to install it. Now, if you pay attention, you see that there is now a remote explorer. This is how we're going to open our repository. This is going to be great. Now we're going to install some extensions that we're going to be using throughout the class. I just want to get them out of the way now. First is VS Code icons. Then we're going to install W3C validator. And finally, we will install Live Preview by Microsoft. I'm going to fast forward through all of this. You can find links to those extensions and you can watch the process here, speed it up so we can get to the next part. With those extensions installed, we're ready to start using our GitHub repository. When I go to my File Explorer, which is always the place where I want to start, this is where I'm going to see a list of all my folders and files. I'm not going to have anything open yet, but because I have the remote repository extension installed, I now have the ability to open a remote repository right here, which is what I'm going to do. So I start by clicking on Open Remote Repository, then the menu in the middle pops down. I have to click on Open Repository from GitHub again, say yes, I allow it. It's going to open up my web browser again, and notice it's signing in. Since you already signed in with your web browser, you should just get to an authorized Visual Studio Code page again. You can go ahead and do that. You don't have to keep this page open. When you're done, you can shut it. You can check out more information about what you're doing with the authorization here, but ultimately you're connecting Visual Studio Code to GitHub. In that last step, all you did was authorize the connection. Now you have to actually open the remote repository, so you click it again. I know it's weird. And then you click again, Open Repository from GitHub, and now it actually lists your repositories. Choose the one for this class, which is going to be .github.io. If I have the Explorer open, I'm going to see, oh, look at that. I have my README, and that's it. It's empty. It's just this like hashtag. You know, it's saying what the name of my GitHub repository is, and that's it. So what's great is now with my Explorer open, I have the ability to create files and folders. With this connection established to GitHub, anything you do here can be pushed onto GitHub, and that's what that is doing. Now there's one more thing that I want you to do with Visual Studio Code, and that is to turn on the autosave feature. This is going to save you from having to publish something that's not saved on your computer. So go ahead and go up to File and then make sure that autosave is checked. So I want to show you what happens when we edit files right here in Visual Studio Code. It's not automatic. Our connection between GitHub, like yes, we have a connection, yes, we're signed in, but it's not constantly being updated to the server. So anytime I make changes down here, I have to push them. So let's just put a little description about what my repository is for. It's for my web design course and the files we create. One of the menus on Visual Studio Code is source control, and that's saying that my source, GitHub, has changed. Notice it says one pending change. If I go and I look at my GitHub repository right now, what I've said here is not present yet. This README is actually the same thing as what's going on here. So you can be coding offline, you can save it locally, and then once you get online, you can commit and push the changes is what it means. Commit and push. So commit says, I'm committing to this. This is a change I want to make. And then you push it, and it establishes that connection between Visual Studio Code and GitHub and makes it happen. So the thing about GitHub, which makes it so cool, and it's called a version control system, because every time you make a commit or a change, you must make a note about what you're doing. Adding this note is a way for programmers to work together on projects and be able to basically communicate, hey, this is what I did to the file, and it gives us an ability to go back to where that change was made and restart if we need to, if we've made a mistake. And then all I'm going to do is commit and push. So I'm putting up a message now and watch what happens. Okay. Watch what happens. There we go. Here's my README, which is kind of like the intro to my repository. This repository is for my web design course and files. Added information on README. That's the message. If you click on it, you get to see the actual like changes and occurrences. You can tell that this is vast, right? I could leave a message for somebody. I mean, there's so many things I can do. So this is a very vast system. I want you to try to keep it simple for now. And then as you move into your web design and web development, then you can just get a little more comfortable and explore things, but I don't want to dump it all on you right now. So this is pretty cool. It's all good. I'm going to do another video about your first website.